Perez, president and CEO of Gathering for Justice, and Jemiles Larte, staff writer for the Marshall Project. Carmen, you have been in this fight a very long time as you are watching what is happening on Capitol Hill. I mean, what strikes me is if not now, then when will there ever be an appetite for reform?
Exactly. Thank you so much, Alicia, for having me on the show tonight. First of all, let's be clear about what reform does not look like. More training. We hear this after every incident, and it's not making a difference. There is no amount of training that will stop the racist killing of Black and Latino people by police. Video after video that surfaces clearly displays that officers cannot provide our communities with the safety we deserve. They are operating within a system designed to bring us harm. The George Floyd Justice and Policy Act calls for many of the reforms we at the Gathering for Justice and Justice League NYC in California and hundreds of organizers across the country have been fighting for years, even decades. You've seen me out in the streets. Restricting qualified immunity to enhance accountability for police officers who commit misconduct, something we just pushed through New York. Prohibiting chokeholds like the one that led to the killing of Eric Garner. Prohibiting the issuance of no-knock warrants like the one that resulted in the killing of Breonna Taylor, establishing a federal registry of police misconduct complaints and disciplinary actions so that police officers are decertified rather than transferred. But the bill doesn't go far enough. We need real transformative change. We need change that is, for most of us, a lived experience only in our imaginations. It is not a question of why anymore. We are past why. It is imperative that this bill passes, and it is essential that we do not stop here. Implementation is key. I cannot emphasize that enough. We must hold our cities and states accountable. Legislation without implementation will get us nowhere, and many of these reforms in this bill, such as the National Registry and the bans on chokeholds, are not new, yet many have been cultivated and implemented, they've not been cultivated and implemented at the federal or the community levels.
You know, so, Jemiles, I both listened to what Carmen just laid out there, right? This argument that this piece of legislation doesn't go far enough, and then I try to square that with the reporting we got from Ali Vitale, which says this legislation, as it exists right now, faces a steep uphill climb in the U.S. Senate. You already have Tim Scott. You know, one of the sticky points that Ali was talking about there is qualified immunity. Is it worth negotiating on this legislation as it is now if that means that at least the first series of actions gets done?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would speak to whether or not it's worth it or not. I think what I would say is that it is substantial, and I think whether or not it goes far enough will be very much in the eye of the beholder. And also, think another important thing to keep in mind here is, you know, when looking at this bill, is that the federal government cannot mandate what state and local law enforcement agencies do. Right? There are 18,000 police departments in this country, and the only thing that they are all bound by, at least on paper, is the U.S. Constitution. So, you know, I think one of the ways that this bill works is in trying to entice and incentivize local law enforcement to institute some of these reforms, to potentially punish them, so sort of a carrot and stick situation if they don't embrace these reforms. But federal funding only makes up roughly 3% of state and local law enforcement spending. So I think it's not a home run strategy, even if it passes, just given the nature of that. I mean, I think I would also say that, you know, I would highlight the fact that the federal government is not the only mover here. Over 30 states have passed more than 140 new police oversight and reform laws, according to a New York Times analysis from last weekend, right? Illinois, New York City, Maryland, Colorado, at the state and local level, there are bills coming addressing a lot of these concerns with or without the federal government.
Right, but let me ask you, I mean, those pieces of legislation in this state, how far can they go without a federal mandate?
They can go just as far, if not further. Again, you know, the federal government does not have the power to go to a police department like the police department in Minneapolis, for example, and say, you must do things this way. They can institute a patterns and practices investigation. They can, you know, encourage the city to enter into a consent decree with them to try and address, you know, if there's problematic practices in the department. But they can't go in and make use of force rules or make rules about body cameras, you know, just by fiat. That is something that they have to bring these localities to the table with funding, by offering something to get them to come to the table.
Carmen, I want to turn to the police killing of Ma'Khia Bryant in Columbus, Ohio. It renewed the debate around use of force. What conversations about use of force do we need to be having right now?
I think what we need to understand is that imagine if Ma'Khia's phone call for help had been met by people who calmed and de-escalated the situation and got the teenagers to talk to each other. I think what we are understanding is that there needs to be an infrastructure that is created in order for us to meet the needs of our communities. An infrastructure that provides community safety. This bill alone won't get us there. We need mental health responders like in New York, violence interrupters like in New Jersey, victim services in the forms of trauma recovery centers, economic security and housing, access to land and investment in cooperatives, political education. We need care and safety in our communities, and we need to have the power to keep ourselves safe. And so what we saw, the fact that Ma'Khia Bryant is no longer with us, is the fact that a police officer could not deal with the situation correctly.
I do want to ask you, before we go, Jamiles, the Biden Justice Department is now moving forward with a civil rights investigation of the Minneapolis